this is the happiest time of the year and everybody's kumbaya and Merry Christmas, and you're now depressed. And, how can you be depressed? It's the best time of the year, right?
Oh, for some people, the holidays are very, very challenging. If you're listening to the podcast, you probably want to know why, for me in particular, do I get depressed around the holidays? And there's a few really common answers to the question. Welcome back to Power of the Mind, the podcast that gives you simple tools to help you better understand yourself and others. This week, we're going to talk about depression and the holidays. Why is it that some people find the holidays very depressing and very challenging to get through? And what can they do about it? And then, if you're not somebody like that, what can you do to help somebody like that? Stick around. It's a good one.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Cast 11 and Power of the Mind, presented by Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare.
Hi.
Happy holidays.
You as well.
Thank you. We got the groovy Greg Struve here. And we're getting ready for holidays.
Groovy is the favorite thing that rhymes with my name.
That's how I always remembered how to say it. I was like, Groovy Struve.
When I was in 7th grade, I also discovered that scurvy and Struve are sort of phonetically similar. So that wasn't a real pleasant experience.
But when you're a kid and you want to make fun of somebody, groovy's not the word.
Screw me also.
Screw me's good. Kind of relates to our
close
last
to Struve.
episode.
So
yeah. Screw me, Struve. I'm not going to even say that one out loud because as I started to say it, it's not good. So
yeah.
Groovy Struve.
We'll do a different podcast about my junior high school trauma.
Oh gosh. I think we all could,
junior high is brutal. It's an awful time to be alive.
I coach kids from 5 years old to 18 years old. And everybody would think like the 18-year-olds are the toughest ones to coach. It is those 11, 12, and 13-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
They all know what they're doing. They all know better than you. They all have angst. Everything is horrible. And don't even get me started. So happy holidays.
Most addictions get started in junior high.
You've mentioned that. I see it. I can totally see that because and this kind of leads me into the episode of, the holidays and depression and, even kids at, 12, 13, 14, the family dynamic of this is the happiest time of the year and everybody's kumbaya and Merry Christmas and where do I fit in? And you're now depressed and, how can you be depressed? It's the best time of the year, right?
For some people, the holidays are very, very challenging.
Yeah.
In part, I think the holidays, if we're getting into the topic, like why would the holidays be so difficult for some people? And, if you're listening to the podcast, you probably want to know why, for me in particular, do I get depressed around the holidays? And there's a few really common answers to the question. Depression is anger turned inward. And anger is the emotional response to a perceived injustice. So when you have something that is held to a specific standard and you look around the world, you look around your world, really, it's probably better to say we look around our world because we can't look around the world. We can only look around our own world and the highly limited view of the world that we're given by the media, which is like the top 5 worst things happening in the world today. Mm-hmm. This is the crappiest thing in your immediate environment, whether it's local or statewide or countrywide or worldwide. But when we look around our world and we see friends and family who appear to be gathering with other friends and other family and having a great time, and that is not our experience, depression might be a common response to that. And there's a lot of things that can be challenging about the holidays. Another example is when I have a holiday and the family system has changed. Sometimes, irrevocably changed. There's been a divorce or a death or another departure of some kind. Depression is a sort of a frequent response to that situation.
Yeah, you bring up death. It was, when I was growing up, it was always grandma's house. Everybody goes to grandma's house. And then, people kind of move away. We moved away. And when we'd make the trek back to, Central California, because that's what we do. It's grandma's house for Christmas. And, when she passed, everybody just kind of went their own way. You know, my mom did, you know, her thing with, you know, her little bit of people there. And my sister turned more inward with their family and, you know, her husband's family. And then me, it's like, my family is my people right here. You know, it's me and my husband, my 5 kids, they're people, but that's our family. And my kids have often made the, you know, the statement that, you know, if mom's not around anymore, do you see us all getting together for Christmas? And they're like, no. And which is crazy to me, because for me, that's the best, right? All the kids are together. Everybody sleeps over. We do Christmas morning just like we did when they were kids. And now, you know, they have children. And so, but you're telling me if I'm gone, that's it. Like, you're just all going your own separate directions. I'm like, that's crazy. But I did the same thing. You know, grandma was gone and that's it. Now this is my family. And so funny to see they bring that up.
And anytime there's change, there's grief. And the other challenge people have, I think we forget that we're not really completely family focused, certainly not extended family focused throughout the rest of the year in our culture generally. Most of us are focused on work and focused on our nuclear family. And those two things take a lot of time and attention. Like, it's no joke to have some sort of nuclear family in America, or a nuclear, I mean, regardless, a group of people who have children to take care of. And a family, there's a lot to do, and there can be a lot of pain and difficulty and unmet expectations and unmet needs in a family system that I can more or less ignore the rest of the year. But come Thanksgiving, it's Thanksgiving travel season, and you know, I think this year there's something like 85 million people they said are going to travel this Thanksgiving, right? And Christmas, you know, that's a quarter of the population of the country in the United States. 85 million Americans moving for the Thanksgiving holiday is a pretty sizable amount, and it really gives testament to the importance of that holiday and that tradition and that gathering that we participate in as a culture every year.
But think about, you know, COVID and the pandemic and how everybody was, I mean, you couldn't be with family. You couldn't do the things you're used to doing. And now that things have, I almost say, forgotten about COVID, and we've forgotten about all of that, that it's just business as usual. And I think people are probably making up for not being with family. And
yeah, that's for sure. And that's another thing too, right? Most of us can forget about COVID, but some folks have been affected and will feel the first really significant impact this holiday season, right? If I had somebody in my family who died or was afflicted with long-haul COVID, I have a friend who's got long-haul COVID about my age, and gosh, the poor guy, he's been down for about a month and a half, can't hardly breathe, can't do much of anything, right? So it's really a challenge to look at the holidays, in part because they bring home some truths at times that can be very painful. And then, of course, too, if I grew up in a situation with drugs or alcohol in particular, but with abuse or family dysfunction, Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's no place to go but family.
Right.
There's no hiding from what's here a lot of the time. And so that reminder is a challenge.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, it was, there weren't a lot of, even though we were I don't want to say affluent, but there was no reason we should be wanting for anything. But 364 days out of the year, we were, you know, it was like you got this much of a clothing budget for the kids and this much of a food budget for food. But on Christmas morning, that was the time to shine, right? It was like, I bestow all these gifts upon you. And it was that, you know, when I was younger, I knew we look forward to Christmas because that's when we get toys and that's when we get stuff. And then as I got older, I was just resentful of it because it was like, wow, you're not this way, you know, 364 days a year, but one day a year you get to be the hero. So that was difficult for me, but you know, but I model my Christmases after that, though. It is if you look at that, right, that resentment, you're not this way
every year, but one day a year you get to be a hero. What you're really saying is the Christmas experience is highlighting this connection, and really what you mean is the disconnection, right? There's a sense of disconnect between you and whichever parent you're talking about. And just like we're talking about, the idea that this holiday season and the family connection there, you can't hide from it for that particular day. That truth comes home, and I have to contend with my experience of disconnect in this particular relationship, and with the experience of feeling maybe unseen, unprovided for, or uncared for. And there's a sense of like, well, you can't just come in one day and make it all right. I'm not doing that. And that's that rebel we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? That part of you that says, nah, I've made the decision, and there will be no reconciling, no telling me that it's different even for today, you know?
Yeah, because once you do that, though, it makes things a little more difficult. Because if you can turn the other cheek, per se, and just go, well, today is the day that everybody's going to get along, and today is the day everybody's going to be peaceful, and then it's easier, right? Because you just follow that norm, and we all paste the smile on our face, and everything's going to be great. But what happens to those people when they go, this is...
Well, that's the scapegoat in the family system. And that's another one of the reasons that the holidays can be challenging, is I get around the entire family, and that always includes the scapegoat, the one person in the family who's decided, or the several people in the family, but one or two people in the family who say, I'll not play by the rules. I would rather have us not do that today. And, you know.
And so they're the ones that shine light on it, or they bring attention?
Oh, sure. Well, sometimes what scapegoats like to do is bring light to dysfunction. That's one of their passions in the family system, is to, just like you said, hey, listen, don't come in here and think you can be all generous when you're so stingy the rest of the year, whatever characteristic it was. So that's the scapegoat shining light on the dysfunction of others. That's what the scapegoat in the family system does so well. That's their role. And then the other thing the scapegoat does, they're the anti-hero. So they take what the family's norms and expectations are, and they say, no, I'm going to not do that. And there's varying degrees of it too. Some people play like a part-time scapegoat, and some people are really hardcore about it. It depends on the person and the situation, and maybe even the year. Yeah. And so we'll have people say, all right, everybody come together, and we'll fall into the sort of the expected norm of the day, until this one guy or gal says, I'm going to drop a bomb in the middle of it. I'm going to throw a grenade in here and see what happens.
But I think that's a little more, I think that person might be a little happier because they're themselves and they're not playing the game.
Well, the scapegoat is generally the most self-aware. I don't know if I'd always say that they're happier, but they're at least honest with themselves about their misery. When you're working in addictions, the scapegoat in the family system is almost always the first one to get into recovery. They know what the truth is. They don't like it, and they might not see it. They usually are even aware of their addiction, although that can be one of the later things that they're aware of. But they see the truth, and they don't always tell the truth. They tell the truth when it suits them, but they see the truth a lot of the time. And if they're honest with themselves, yes, a scapegoat, if they like themselves, they'll generally tell you no. They're generally, assuming they're still in their process, right? If they've gotten some recovery and gotten some insight and moved along. It's hard to like yourself when you're doing things that are damaging to other people. And that's the challenge with the scapegoat, is they'll create mayhem, but they suffer for it because it's hard to have a high self-esteem if you're doing unestimable things. Unless you're a narcissist, but that's a different podcast. Yeah,
we've actually covered that a little bit. It's a
popular podcast. Everybody loves the narcissist.
Everybody loves the narcissist, but it's, for me,
actually nobody loves the narcissist, but the narcissist. They love talking about the narcissist. Let's put it that way.
The narcissist loves the narcissist.
The narcissist, believe it or not, does not love the narcissist. If you get down to it, they tend to be deeply, deeply lonely and sad. But
watch the episode if you haven't. People should watch the episode because or listen to the episode. It's really good.
Yeah.
For me, the depression on the holidays, because it is the I think people go through it a lot in different varying degrees, because for me, it's like, I'll buy all the presents, we'll decorate the house, we have dinner. But you always think of the perfect dinner. Everybody's around the table, everybody's laughing, having a good time. The house is clean. It's always clean.
Sure.
And these visions of perfection on the holidays. And dinner just magically came together, and we're all in the kitchen talking and laughing and cutting vegetables together. And then the reality of the day steps in. It's like, I bought all these presents, but now I have to wrap them. I'm in the kitchen and nobody's doing what I'm asking, or I don't ask for help. So I just sit there and I just dwell on the fact that nobody could read my mind and jump in the kitchen and know that I needed 10 pounds of potatoes peeled or whatever.
Sure.
The presents that I thought were going to be amazing got opened in 5 minutes and they're done. The house is a mess. And so all of these, and nobody's been matching pajamas and watching, wonderful, It's a Wonderful Life. And it's just, I'm tired and I'm cranky and I spent way too much money, and the house is a mess.
And so the reality doesn't meet the expectation or the hope.
And no matter what I do, I always say I'm going to tone it down, take it back a notch this year. I'm only making like 3 sides with dinner. I'm only buying this much for each kid, and the house will stay clean because we're all going to stay on top of it. No, it doesn't happen.
No.
So I don't get depressed. My expectations are never does it turn out the way so I've learned to try to set the bar a little bit lower, but.
Well, that's good. That's maturity, know.
Growing up.
You might even discover that there are other situations in your life where you set the bar pretty high and work pretty hard to make it work, and where things don't always come together the way one might like. Yeah.
But it's funny because I coach my kids on that. My
Sure.
family. I'm like, I know this is our first time at Disneyland taking, my granddaughter. I'm going to need you to understand that this isn't going to be the way you think it's going to be. You think we're going to just sail through every line, and she's going to be in a good mood all day because we're at Disneyland, and, Minnie Mouse and Mickey Mouse are going to come up and, carry her through the park. None of that is going to happen. You're going to be mad most of the day. Yeah. So I tell people, I educate people on how to manage their expectations, but I really am not good at it, doing it myself. So what happens when for me, I've always been interested because a lot of our topics have talked about the somebody who's been on drugs or going through recovery, and, the struggles that they're going through, and getting back into the family fold and dealing with the family. What about the family who has dealt with, the son or the daughter or whoever who's stolen from the family or caused the ruckus? But now we're supposed to just pretend it never happened, or do we? You're back, you're better, great. But there's still a lot of resentment there, I would think. So
there can be, yeah. I mean, it's a very challenging thing. In the 12-step programs, they talk about the wreckage of our past kind of catching up with us as we go back into the family. And there's not like a one-size-fits-all way to handle that, but it is a really common challenge when, somebody has been really difficult for a long time and really in the grip of an addiction, and then they get better for a while. One of the biggest obstacles that comes up when someone gets better is the family's still mad. Mm-hmm. Now, you see a little less of that with drugs and alcohol, in part because there's an understanding that it's an addiction. But where it gets really interesting is with the behavioral addictions: food, sex, and gambling, especially gambling. Not a lot of grace for the gambling addict.
Right.
Your spouse walks in one day and says, I know you thought we had this is a true story. I know you thought we had $250,000 of equity in the house, but the bank's coming next week and it's gone. It's all gone.
Wow.
Also, there's some credit cards I hadn't mentioned. That's a tough day, and there's not a lot of grace forthcoming in that situation. And, when you have a kid who's stealing or running and gunning or dealing drugs or doing whatever else that they're doing and they get better, one of the difficulties that we have is the resentment and anger about their behavior is such that it's really hard to know how to deal with them. When they get better, if we're enabling, if we ignore everything and pretend nothing mattered. One, that doesn't really work. Mm-hmm. Most of us aren't able to do that. And two, it tends to move things in the wrong direction because it's enabling. It's protecting somebody from the consequences of their behavior, which removes the impetus to change and to grow and to continue. On the other hand, if we come down on them real hard and let them know that they're not off the hook, that can bring up a lot of shame and can in turn result in their medicating their shame in the way that they've been most accustomed to medicating their shame. So it's really an interesting balance. There's a 12-step program called Al-Anon, and it's for the friends and family members of alcoholics.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah. And what happens there is basically the folks who are in relationship with an addict, what they discover is often they're addicted to the relationship. Addiction can be thought of, the most basic form of addiction is intermittent response. Basically, the slot machine is sort of the purest demonstration of the behavioral side of an addiction. If you give a mouse cocaine and they can have the cocaine anytime they want it, they often won't become addicted to it. They'll come up, they'll take the hits of the cocaine, and then they'll move along. But if you do the thing where they push the lever 20 times and they get intermittent reinforcement, is that what I said earlier? Intermittent reinforcement is what I meant. I don't remember if I said, I think I said intermittent response or something. Intermittent reinforcement, where on a random distribution, they hit the lever 20 times, and times 6, 14, and 15, they get some cocaine. The rest of the times they don't. They'll hit the lever again and again and again and again and again and again and again until they die. If you do it every 5th time, they get addicted to it, but not nearly as badly, and it's not as severe.
Because it's predictable, right?
It's predictable, but the unpredictable intermittent reinforcement is brutal on the human psyche. And that's what happens when you're in relationship with an addict or an alcoholic. They're incredibly kind and loving and supportive for a while. Mm-hmm. And then one day they're not. They're there for you, and they're the best side of themselves is what comes out when they're either sober or under the influence. You don't know it. They're showing up for you. They're doing all the stuff that you're hoping that they'll do. You have a functional relationship, and then they're gone. And the intermittent reinforcement is brutal. And when they come back, the defenses that you've developed over the course of however long you've been in that relationship, they show up. And a lot of times they make it a lot harder for the person to get sober. Yeah. And that's where working the 12 steps around our addiction to another human being can be so helpful, because the resentment, the 12 steps at their core are about resentment. That's really it. The great theory underneath the 12-step programs, the whole message is you're resentful and you're not taking responsibility for what is yours. And so when a person works the steps, they go through their resentments, and they look at them very closely, and often they discover that their resentments are basically a product of their own decisions and choices, which causes the resentments to decrease in significantly. Yeah. And then they make amends, where they try to make right the wrongs that they've done. That's essentially the 12 steps. And for a person to do that in Al-Anon, they do that themselves, and it takes away a lot of that resentment related to the person in their life. So that's generally the simplest, cleanest way to deal with the problem.
So with Al-Anon, you can go with the person, and it's kind of like a counseling or something with you and the...
No, you generally go without them. They go to a program or not. A lot of people go to Al-Anon whose friends or family members are not in the program. I've seen a lot of people. It's a lot easier to get somebody in your life sober if you go to Al-Anon for about a year. It tends to work much better than the alternative of just browbeating them into sobriety or interventions or things like that.
Because if they're not ready, but you've got to know how to handle and help them be ready and supportive.
Yeah. And again, intermittent reinforcement in an intimate relationship creates insanity. It brings out the absolute worst parts of myself. the absolute most challenging pieces of myself. It can include all kinds of stuff: verbal violence, physical violence, everything. There's a lot of challenges that show up in relationships. Or sometimes it'll bring out the rug. They talk about the elephant under the rug. They bring out the rug, but it can be very, very difficult.
Because if you know that every Friday I'm going to have a problem with him, right?
Yeah.
Every Friday. So I'm just going to brace for it. I know Friday is going to be bad, but by Sunday he'll be better, and Monday is a new day and he'll go to work and everything will be fine. I just got to be ready for Friday. But if you don't know, like, it's Friday and everything's good, but Tuesday, now it's like, I don't,
exactly.
my head is spinning. I don't know how to keep that straight.
If it works that way for a year or whatever, that's fine. But addiction always is progressive. Addiction always progresses. Real addiction always gets worse and always changes and shifts. And so the very human and understandable desire to control it is inevitably thwarted. And it creates deep pain and frustration. Exquisite pain in a human being. I've yet to see. I'm sure there are people who can be in relationship with someone with an addiction who don't develop an addiction to the person, but it seems pretty difficult to me. If you have, if you're wired in a typical way, it is pretty difficult not to do that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. But when I think with, when you're trying to bring somebody back into the family or dealing with the family, 364 days out of the year, you can pretty much be okay. But Christmas, you all have to get together, right? And so
there's definitely a social push in that direction.
Because if you don't invite them, right?
I can think of a client who had an alcoholic in his life, and the holidays were coming, and he said, I'm good. Hey folks, if this person is in my life, is part of the thing, I'm not going to be part of the thing. And I would like him not to be invited. And in that case, there was some strong depression around the holidays for some of the folks attached to that family, but that was it. So this client had to make the decision: do I take care of what I know is best for me,
right,
or do I play along? And that's a hard choice. I'm not advocating that everybody who has that problem put their foot down and say, no, don't do this. I get really nervous when people make broad generalizations about how to behave in any setting, but particularly this one. But for this client, I think it probably represented a significant amount of growth.
To be able to distance yourself and know that I'm protecting this, right? I'm going to protect myself.
To park on the sidewalk instead of in the driveway is another form. And I think we talked about that a couple weeks ago, right? I have the ability to leave, and I can decide what I'm going to expose myself to and what I'm not.
Right. If they put too much salt in the gravy, we overlook it.
Salt in the gravy?
Yeah. So, too much salt. But they berate you and make it uncomfortable. And
and as far as guests go, the simplest way to avoid resentment is one, to look back. So if I have a resentment in my life, if I'm frustrated with a family member, it's either because I got walked on or I didn't speak up. I was people pleasing. And if I was people pleasing, I was people pleasing. So whose fault is that? It's mine.
Right.
If I allowed inappropriate behavior to happen, I can sit in that victim place and be like, oh man, that behavior was so inappropriate, which actually feels good and is fun. It's so much fun to be the victim. It really is.
I can't believe they did that.
Listen, there's so much wrong with this person and how they behaved. What part did I play? At the least, I stuck around.
Yeah.
Often, I maybe even antagonized them a little bit. Often I would say things
pushed a few
knowing
buttons.
What the result would be. Often I get a little testy. Poke the bear, as they say. When I really can look honestly at my part, resentment tends to go away. Right? It's a lot harder to be resentful at somebody for their behavior if I'm really owning how I contributed to it. So that's a big piece of the process. And then it's incumbent upon me to make some changes. And I can change in two ways. One way is I can decide I'm not going to be a part of that process anymore. And I can do that by maybe not antagonizing or maybe not coming, not being there. Mm-hmm. But the other way I can change, one of the other big things that's my part in most resentments is my expectations. You know, mm-hmm. Uncle Bob always gets drunk at Christmas. We're going to go to Christmas. I wonder what Uncle Bob will do this year.
Yep.
Spoiler alert, he's going to get drunk.
Going to get drunk.
He's going to say the same stuff he always says and do the same stuff he always does.
Bingo, right?
So if I change my expectations, off I go. A lot of times too, it's important to look at, you're talking about preparing the meal and kind of doing all these things and having the disappointment afterward. Sometimes if I really dig inside, what I'll discover is that I am doing those things with an expectation. I'm doing those things with a sort of a demand attached to them. And sometimes it's unconscious.
Right.
But that's an important thing to look at on my side. Like, am I offering this stuff with the intention of getting something back, or am I offering it? So that's an important detail too. And the reason to look at it isn't so much like, oh man, everybody does that. That's human nature as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. But when I see that and let it go, A, I enjoy the giving process a bit more. And then B, I just have less expectation and therefore less resentment and less depression.
So it's just, there's just so many reasons to be thankful over the holidays, but so many reasons to, be depressed over the holidays. People that, I know I'd have to guess suicide is up during the holidays. Yeah, one of my client I really I've enjoyed working with, a big part of the client's work has been processing the suicide of a family member that happened in the midst of the holidays. And so, yes, the holidays have been incredibly, incredibly painful as a result of that, I think it's, I have people in my life that don't have a lot of family. And so I tend to downplay we've got to do this over the holiday.
Sure,
we've got all these, got to deal with all the family and got to deal with all this, because you feel bad because they're either don't have family or just, and it's, do you want to come to our house or, but let me warn you, it's crazy. It is absolutely nuts. So, so I would think loneliness contributes to the depression, or, maybe something that you used to have that you don't have anymore, or like you said, loss or death, or so a takeaway from this, be thankful for what you have.
Well, maybe if you have something worthy of being thankful for.
I always do that.
Well, just saying.
I'm a glass half full girl. You got to remind me. But
well, we just look at, like, there are a lot of us who have a lot of opportunities for thankfulness and gratitude over the holidays. That's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. There are some folks whose holiday situation is pretty rough, and so thankfulness in that situation isn't true, right? That's the thing is it's not about. I'm not correcting you, right? It's obviously delightful and valuable to look at the merit of being more thankful in gratitude, or living more in gratitude. And the most important thing is to look and see what's true. And if, for example, you had somebody who you lost, and this holiday season is going to bring about a bunch of grief, there's value in that. And there's value in moving forward with acceptance of, this is grief. This is what grief will do. This is the process that I will go through. And it will be hard and okay, right?
I think it's a testament to the things that you've seen and done in your life, as far as being on that side of, as a counselor and therapist, for people who aren't always in that environment or situation. It's, it's very easy to go, well, just be thankful. There's always something to be thankful for.
Sure.
And we are blinded almost to the other side of that. Like sometimes there isn't anything to be thankful for. Sometimes there isn't, you know, you wake up on Christmas morning and everything's, you know, kittens and puppies under the tree. It's sad and it's bleak and it's, you know, and lonely. And
I think what we get back to is the idea that the reason the holidays can be so challenging for so many people is the holidays tell an unvarnished truth. And that's it, you know, and sometimes that truth really is joyful and joyous and beautiful, and sometimes it's brutal and awful. And many times it's actually someplace in between fairly frequently. And sometimes it can be all those things at once, right? It can be joyful and brutal. And I think that's a worthwhile sort of thing to remember, or message, I guess, kind of like what you're saying, you know. And for folks who haven't had the experience of difficulty, you know, it's worthwhile to note.
Yeah.
Certainly isn't often. It's much more than it used to be, but it isn't always what's expressed culturally. So
take it easy on the people around you.
Take it easy on yourself, really.
Take it easy on yourself. I always just think about, you know, somebody that's angry, or you see them in the store and they're rude or whatever, and it's to stop and think about maybe the pain that they're going through, or, you know, why they do the things they do, or, you know, whatever. I've grown a lot after talking with you, because I remember, if I look back on the first couple episodes, it was, you know, I was the first one to go, okay, you're depressed. Stop being depressed. You know, you're sad. Stop being sad.
The Bob Newhart approach. Yeah, did we ever talk about that in this?
No.
Oh man, there's a Bob Newhart skit he did. It might have been for Saturday Night Live. You can get on YouTube, and he's a therapist, and the guy comes in and he says, "Okay, I'm ready." And Bob says, "Well, I take the money up front." Oh, okay. That'll be $15 or whatever it is, or $5. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I have to get paid up front. Okay. Well, that's weird. The guy gives him some money and sits down, and he starts talking, and Bob interrupts him and says, "Well, stop it." He says, "Well, I'm just having a hard time with my wife and her." "Well, stop it. Quit it. Stop doing that." And eventually he just keeps doing it. It's funnier in the skit, but
it's him just going, stop. But that's why he gets paid up front, because he's not effective.
Nobody makes it through the session. Yeah. They last 5 minutes and go.
It's like, it hurts when I touch my elbow. Well, stop touching your elbow, right? I've gotten, is that a word?
Yeah, I think so.
I've become more, I don't know, you could ask my kids, because they'd probably be like, no, you haven't. But I try to be more understanding of, my daughter called me from the airport, and she drove her boyfriend to the airport, and it was a few days before Thanksgiving.
Sure.
Worst time to be at the airport. And here, you know, she's lost, and I'm like, well, where are you? Well, I'm in the terminal. I'm just driving around. I don't know where I'm going. I'm having a panic attack. I'm like, 30 episodes me would have been, stop, get yourself together and drive the car, focus on what's in front of you and do it. 30 episodes in me says, I'm going to need you to just take a few deep breaths, center yourself. Okay, let's think about this for a minute. Airport's a busy place. If you have to go around the terminal 2 or 3 times before you can figure out how to get on the freeway, that's okay. You know, if people are cutting you off, just go with the flow, go with the traffic. If you need to try to pull over, do that. But just take a few calming breaths. Mm-hmm. I don't know where that lady came from, but I've got to guess that you had something to do with that, because it is fun. It's just accepting that there are situations or people that don't, I don't know, they do have, their panic attacks are real. Depression is real. And that is important to note, because that's not something that I ever paid attention to or really believed. Like a panic attack, stop having a panic attack. And then after talking with you for, you know, the better part of almost a year, it's like, it's real. It is debilitating for some people and horrible for people. So thank you for allowing me to be able to at least fake my way through it, even if I believe it now. I'm not always the kindest person or patient person with that. So
well, I really enjoy your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a big heart, and you show up with a real sincere desire to understand and to grow. So it's really enjoyable to hang out with you.
Well, thanks. And now, I mean, we're 31 episodes in, so I'm basically an expert now. So I'm excited about this. So, well, I'll cut this one and be ready for, Merry Christmas. And if people are struggling this time of year, I'm assuming there are no holidays for therapists and addiction counselors and
not inpatient anyway. Yeah.
And so who they talk to? What do they do?
I always like Psychology Today if you're not going to go residential. And if you are going residential, Granite Mountain is a pretty good option.
Awesome. And how they get a hold of you?
GregStruve.com works for me, and GraniteMountainBHC.com, behavioral healthcare, short for behavioral healthcare. GraniteMountainBHC.com. So.
Well, enjoy the holidays. If you need help, get help.
Yeah.
And, we'll leave you guys with that. Thank you so much for tuning in to Cast 11 and Power of the Mind with Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare and Greg Struve.
For information about mental health and addiction treatment, you can reach out to Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare online at granitemountainbhc.com. That's granitemountainbhc.com. Or give us a call at 877-338-6287. That's 877-338-6287. If you have a comment about this podcast or a question you'd like us to address in the podcast, you can check out the Contact Us page at my website, gregstruve.com. That's GregStruve as in Victor, E as in Edward.com. This has been a Cast 11 production brought to you by Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare. Follow Cast 11 on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Talking Glass Media.